Welcome to But Enough About Me, a podcast about other people. My name is Tyler Andrews. I'm a Nashville-based photographer, husband, and father. I'm trying to collect the stories of everyone around me, whether we're best friends or total strangers. I want to know what made you the person you are today. Welcome to the show. Wow! I am so excited to finally get to share this with folks. I've been working on this for a long time, and now it's finally coming out. This is the first episode, so let me give you a little bit of background. This is an autobiographical podcast for other people. This is not about me. This is about everyone else. Today's episode, the first one, is my good friend Krystal Cook. I met Krystal a few years ago. 7-8 years ago, when she was engaged to a gentleman by the name of Skylar. It's a bit of a spoiler, but I think you'll forgive me. Anyway, I was still photographing weddings back then, and she contacted me, curious to see if we could figure out a way for me to work with them. And we had one of those meetings that just, sometimes you just instantly connect with people, and that's exactly what happened here. It took us, I think, 3 attempts to finally get to sit down together. We kept having to cancel for one reason or another. And when we finally got together, we just started telling each other our stories instead of doing the typical meeting, business meeting. Well, anyway, long story short, within 30 minutes or so, we were all 3 crying in the middle of a coffee shop in downtown Franklin, Tennessee. And it was a little bit awkward, but clearly a relationship that was meant to be. So we have maintained it ever since. I love Krystal. She's one of my favorite humans. Her husband, Skylar, is another one of my favorite humans. These 2 people are awesome. She is a massage therapist here in Nashville, Tennessee. She is currently pregnant with their first child. I'm so excited about that. And what else can I tell you? I think you're going to love her. Her story is pretty different, pretty unique. Definitely not what most people expect when they first meet her. Without further ado, Krystal Cook. That's probable. Spend that much time on stage.
Right.
All right. Krystal, hello.
Hi.
Tell me about your folks.
All right. My parents are from Ohio and Indiana. I don't remember which is from, but
okay. So one is from one, one's from the other.
Right, exactly. But they ended up getting married and then moving to Montana, which is where I grew up.
Whereabouts in Montana?
The very northwestern corner.
Okay.
On the border of Canada, literally, and Idaho. We did not live in a town, but the closest town was Rexford or Eureka.
Okay.
It's hard to describe.
In Montana, there's hours between towns.
Exactly. I'll put it this way. We were about 2.5 hours from Glacier National Park, which is a place that people might recognize the name of. So what to say about them? They were both raised Amish.
Okay.
And they met I know this about them. They met at a wedding where they were both in the bridal party. And that's kind of where that started. In fact, I think they were in 2 different weddings in like the same year where they saw each other twice. And that's how they met. And then they started their relationship. And I don't think it took too long before they got married and moved out to Montana with my dad's side of the family.
I was just going to ask what happened to Montana.
Yeah, it was mostly with my dad's side of the family, and they were still Amish, and so we grew up in an Amish community. Mm-hmm. That's where they lived. My dad worked at a sawmill that was basically right across the road from our house, and then he eventually started his own logging company, and he was a logger basically my entire young childhood, owned his own company, his own equipment, that kind of thing. And then when I was 8, he actually became a pastor, not in the Amish community. So they left the Amish right before I was born.
Okay, so wait. Pause there.
Yeah.
Horse and buggy, awesome blue shirts and really big beards. What is Amish? What is that? What does it mean?
I think they originated from the Quakers, if I know my history correctly. So basically, they are ultra conservative, and they would, I think, consider themselves Christians. But ultra conservative, no electricity, no cars, no modern conveniences, horse and buggy,
Right.
sew their own clothes.
And why is that?
Everything is basically their belief of how is the right way to live, how it's the right way to live. It's the way to, they all have a list of, it's basically built around a list of rules.
Okay. So it would not be inaccurate to think of it as kind of a Levitical law.
Yeah.
Like the Jews would line up with the Levitical law, that they've got their own
Yes.
set of doctrines, and these are the things we will and won't do. And,
Right. Yeah, that's definitely a way to look at it.
Okay. That's so different. But I guess if you're going to do that, Montana's a good place to do it.
Yeah, definitely.
So they left the Amish community officially just before you were born?
They left the Amish church, which means they stopped going to church. We did not move. We stayed in the same house, in the same community. We continued to grow up in that community, but we no longer went to church. Yeah.
How'd that go over?
I obviously was not
Right.
aware of how it was going, but I have talked to my parents about it some. My dad actually lost his job because the mill that he worked at was an Amish mill. He lost his job. We were not completely shunned by his family, which in some communities, shunning means that they won't even talk to you anymore. They will not associate with you. You've left the church, and so you are no longer considered to be a part of them.
Right. That's what I expected. So when you said they didn't even move, I guess that's a good thing that they weren't shunned.
I don't know that they had any options of anywhere else to move to. I don't know if that was part of that. I'm actually not completely sure why we didn't physically leave the Amish community. But that was where, we were growing up. They were raising their children. I'm the 6th, so they had a bunch of little kids at that point. I'm sure all of that kind of played a part in it. My dad's family, we still talked to them. We still saw them at holidays. We were a mile down the road from them. So, but there were things like there was a little Amish community store. Mm-hmm. And I remember them not accepting my dad's money anymore. We would go in as the kids, and we could buy things because we weren't the ones that had made the choice to leave. But I remember him, I remember him placing something on the counter. It may have been a Coke or something, and they wouldn't even take his money. So in those ways, there was definitely awkwardness, and
they made it apparent.
They made it very apparent that it was not approved of.
Wow.
So,
and that's years after, because if you remember it.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry.
No,
I interrupted.
it's okay.
Needed to know that. So your dad decides to leave the church. Your folks decide to leave the church, mm-hmm. and he decides to become a pastor.
When they left the Amish church, kind of in that process before they actually officially left, they had actually been starting to go to a different church. The Amish in that community actually only had church every other Sunday. So on the in-between Sundays, he was going to a different church with friends that he had made, and maybe even a Bible study, or maybe it started out as a Bible study. I'm not sure. And it was a church that ended up being basically comprised of other families that had left the Amish or Mennonite. The majority of the people in that church ended up being ex-Amish or ex-Mennonite.
Wow.
So he started going to that, and over the years, we started attending that regularly. And then the pastor of that church, he ended up having to move to a different state just because of work outside of pastoring, because he wasn't fully supported by the church. And I don't know what the process was, but somehow my dad became chosen, or he chose to become the pastor at that point.
That's just a big switch to go for, because that's your way of life. And I know they didn't abandon all their beliefs at that point about the right way to live. Right. So it's not like the power lines came running straight into the house and off to the races for modern society. Right. What changes did they, I guess, embrace, for lack of a better word?
Well, I grew up, we had electricity in the house. Okay. We had electricity, we had cars.
So it did change quite a bit.
Yeah. And I don't know when exactly that happened. I don't know how fast that transition was. I do know that, so we lived in a house that was literally just a basement for the first year of my life. And then they built on 2 stories on top of the basement.
Wow.
When I was, because there's pictures of it, this is how I know that, in my first year of life. And so I know when they built on the middle and top stories of the house, they put electricity in and lights and, all of that. so
prior to that, they're living in a mole hole.
Yeah, literally. I mean, my mom, they had 6 children in a tiny little basement.
And you said a basement, so they built underground.
Yeah, part of it was underground.
Which is great for climate control and I would say efficiency, but that's not a concern exactly.
Right.
But it's good for climate control and things like that. Yeah. But that's still weird. Sorry.
It's all right. You might be saying that a lot about my story.
No, I love it.
Because there is a lot about my story that could be considered weird.
Different from
Very
the
different
norm.
Yes.
That's awesome. That's so crazy. Okay, so you grew up with many of the normal modern conveniences.
Yes.
What didn't you have? Maybe that's a better question to ask.
We did not have TV. We got a TV at some point. I don't know when, but it was never cable. Like, we watched VHS tapes occasionally. We did not have... honestly, it's almost hard for me to compare to what a normal childhood is, because that was my normal, We still grew up very conservatively in that our mom made all of our clothes, and I wore strictly only dresses until I was probably 13 or 14.
Wow.
Like, for sports, we would wear shorts under our dresses as the girls. We didn't cut our hair. We trimmed our hair, but we were not allowed to cut our hair, wear makeup. We could not listen to any kind of non-Christian music, and a lot of even Christian music we weren't allowed to listen to. Trying to think of other things that are strange.
How do you determine whether the Christian music is Christian enough? Like presence of electric guitars?
Yeah, that was a big no. And drums. Drums were a big no.
No drums, huh?
No drums.
Aww.
I think their thinking has hopefully changed since then, but I do remember being told, or the idea being, that drums were summoning the devil kinds of ideas. So
that's so fun.
Yeah.
I love that. I'm sorry. I mean, I'm sorry for your childhood, but also that's amazing.
There are a lot of things about my childhood that I used to be sorry about, but at the same time, there's so many things about it that I can now see are, they made me who I am, and they instilled some values in me that, I don't regret. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
I have to ask, what tapes did you have? What VHS tapes did you have?
Off the top of my head, some of my favorites were Pride and Prejudice, the six VHS tape set. Is
Jane Austen acceptable in the simple communities, or
none of
rebellious?
That. None of that would have been in the Amish community.
Just a book. I mean, not the movie.
Probably not.
Wow.
I don't know.
Like,
honestly, I don't know if they even are, like, what type of fiction books they're even allowed to read, if any. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
sorry.
I wouldn't know about that. No, that's okay.
So Jane Austen.
Jane Austen, Pride and Prejudice, Fiddler on the Roof
Yep.
was absolutely a favorite.
Classic.
Andy Griffith Show, we had the box set of that. The Scarlet Pimpernel was a favorite of ours growing up. We honestly did not have a lot of time in front of the TV.
Sure. Yeah.
that was pretty rare. So,
Man.
but those are some of the top ones that came to mind.
Just out of curiosity. I know I wore out my copy of the Ninja Turtles movie on VHS, but I'm assuming you didn't have that one.
Cartoons were not. We really weren't allowed. Definitely no Disney. Nothing with magic. Nothing with witches. Nothing like that. So, yeah. I really I can't think of a single, as a young child, I cannot think of a single cartoon that we watched. We would watch, real movies. Oh, but we would watch movies like Ghost in the Darkness. So I don't know if you know what that is.
I imagine it's about ghosts.
No, that's actually a true story about the lions over in Africa that were the man-eating lions.
Val Kilmer and Michael Douglas?
Yes. Incredible movies, but probably not one I'd show to my 5-year-old.
Right.
So not sure why that one was okay. I think my parents, they really liked for us to watch movies of true stories, which I get,
Absolutely.
know. But I think there were some that maybe they didn't really think too hard about the age appropriateness of what we were watching. So
you grew up, you were number 6.
Yes.
And above you are all sisters, is that right?
No.
No.
I am literally exactly in the middle of both number and gender. So there are 3 girls and 2 boys above me.
Oh.
And 3 girls and 2 boys below me.
What's the age range?
The oldest is 10 years older than me, so she is 39. And the youngest is a set of twins, and they are, 21.
How much chaos was in your house?
Constant.
Yeah.
And honestly, this is another part of my childhood. I don't remember a time where there was not more than 13, because my parents had a habit of they have hearts of gold, and so they would take in literal hitchhikers off the road, who would sometimes stay for a week and sometimes stay for several months. Once we had the second 2 stories, there was at one point an entire family that lived in our basement. There was also a time where there was another family nearly as large as ours in a totally different house on our property. We had 20 acres. There was one year in particular, I remember we had 2 girls living in the home with us, and then a man and his 3 young sons living in a trailer also on our property. And I believe we were feeding all of them. So at that point, I don't remember if my oldest siblings were all still home, but it was definitely, upwards of 13 people being fed. And
that's amazing. So at that point, because you said your dad was working as a logger,
mm-hmm.
I assume you guys farmed as well, like sustenance farming?
Yes, we had a very big garden. As long as I can remember, we had animals of every type.
That's awesome.
And so we basically, we lived off of our own farm. There was a time where we raised pigs that we sold to the 4-Hers, but it wasn't like we were farming for money. We were just farming for our own sustenance.
Well, yeah. You've got that many people.
Yeah.
You need
and you live
food.
far enough away from grocery stores.
Right.
You have to supply your own. So, yeah.
That's so I stress about having a family of 4 kids, and I can't imagine providing for all of that.
No, I can't either.
Okay. So tell me about your mom. We haven't heard about her much at all.
Mm-hmm. My mom is one of the sweetest women you will ever meet in your life. To this day, she is in love with babies, and she would adopt a baby in a heartbeat at this very moment. 11 was not enough for her, I don't think. So,
oh my God.
But she is also the hardest working woman I've ever met. And I hope that I have learned some of those things from her. She has a heart of gold. And I just remember her working a lot, my entire childhood. And Working and holding babies are my memories of her. If I picture her in my mind, those are the two things that come to mind. So yeah, she stayed at home. She obviously to take care of all of us, and she now actually runs a business of her own. So
Really?
she does work outside of the home now, and she helps my dad with his business. So she's still working hard and holding babies.
What is her career now?
I don't know that she would call it a career. She actually discovered a business basically where she cleans out houses that have been like repossessed by the government or foreclosed on, or different scenarios like that. And so she gets contracts to go and she calls them clean outs, and goes and cleans them out. She has employees now that do most of the hard work for her, thankfully.
Right.
But yeah, it's actually been very successful. And
That's a big transition from starting out in a dedicated Amish community
right.
to running your own business.
Right. Yeah, definitely. She's pretty incredible.
That's awesome. What's your dad do now?
My dad builds and delivers storage barns. So like the ones that you see at Lowe's.
I should have called him to build this one.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Tell me about elementary school.
So I'm not going to have exact memories of which year was which. It's
Sure.
all kind of muddled together. So I know for a couple of years we were homeschooled, but when we weren't homeschooled, it was basically all the kids in church went to school together. I don't remember which grades were which. I think it was when it would have been my elementary school years. We actually built a school building on our property. Again, we had 20 acres.
Right.
So we had the school building was on our property, and all of the kids from church came to our property to go to school. So, but it was, I think if I'm remembering correctly, like the biggest it ever was like 30 children, and that was K through 12, all ages. So I only ever had one other person in my same grade.
Wow. I hope you like that person. You don't have to say their name.
I won't. I liked him pretty well, though.
Okay. So it wasn't public school
No.
per se. It was
No.
like a co-op.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Basically. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. It was never public school. Well, as we got older, I don't remember what grade it was, and I don't specifically remember why, because the school building was still on our property. But eventually, we did start going into town. The closest one, it was Eureka, and it was still a small Christian school with mostly the kids from our church. And that was probably, I would say, sixth grade maybe when I started that. But in those years, maybe it was between the years of having school on our property and then going into town. I do remember at least one year where we were homeschooled at home, like our mom homeschooled us.
Okay.
So, which another note to my mom, she never had above an 8th grade education, I believe. So she was basically learning all of the things and then teaching them to us.
So you started in that kind of community school.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't start as a homeschooler and then move into that.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Interesting.
And that community school also, it was, so my oldest sister was actually my first grade teacher because she graduated or finished 12th grade and
Right.
automatically became the teacher. So
You gotta earn your
that's the kind
keep.
of, yeah, exactly.
That's great. So how much of your family is still in Montana?
None of my immediate family, actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. My dad's side of the family is still in Montana, but all of my sisters and brothers are either in Washington State, or I have one sister that married a Canadian and she's in Canada, and then I have one sister here with me in the Nashville area.
And your folks are still there, right?
And my folks are in Washington.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, jumping around.
That's all right.
Back to elementary school.
Mm-hmm.
So your dad was a logger. What exactly does that mean? I mean, I have the mental image of a logger. Is that the reality? I mean, he just runs around with a chainsaw and cuts down trees. And
It's progressed a little bit more than that. He had, I think he started out with just a chainsaw probably. But by the time I have memories of it, he had big equipment like skidders and excavators. And he would have, from what I understand, he would bid on different logging jobs. And sometimes those were near enough that he could go and come back in the same day. There were times that they were far enough away, he would have to spend the week on the property and then be home on the weekends. And
so your mom was raising teens of children
yes.
alone.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. And I mean,
Wow.
literally in a family of our size, you start to raise each other. I mean, I was babysitting by the time I was 8 years old. So as soon as you can,
be trusted not to light something on fire.
right.
Yeah.
You're taking care of the younger siblings.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So you said your oldest sister is currently 39-ish?
Yes.
We won't totally out her.
Yes.
And you said you're 29?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So elementary school for you would have been mid-90s?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So progress. You said sixth grade was, you think that was the homeschooled year?
Probably
Ish?
fifth or sixth grade.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you were in Eureka.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, at a Christian school there, which again was mostly the kids that went to church together. There were some other town kids.
Yes.
I say that in quotation marks. But they were, Christians. They didn't go to the same church, but they came to that school. So it was slightly bigger, but I still only had maybe 2 or 3 people in the same grade.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So tell me more about growing up in a family that size. What's day-to-day life like?
There was really good things about it. I mean, in a family that size, your best friends are your siblings. There's a lot of work.
Yeah.
A lot of work. Constant
farm,
work.
basically.
Yeah. Summertime or school time, it did not matter. There was always work. Whether it was cleaning the house or taking care of the animals or working in the garden. I remember basically being told the list of chores to do before we could possibly get an hour of playtime, but then also the list of chores that would need to be done after the hour of playtime.
Wow.
So it wasn't like I hear, people these days and raising their kids and telling, saying the 1 or 2 or 3 chores they have to check off by the end of the day. That it was more of a constant something had to be done.
And when you say chores, I'm
Yes.
of course asking now so that my sons can listen to this. Tell me more about the sorts of chores you were doing at, say, 13 and 15.
I was in I don't know, I guess I was in the order in the family, and I was a tomboy. So I actually got a lot of the outside chores. So for me, it was milking the cow. It was working in the garden. It was changing irrigation pipes, like those big old silver ones.
Yep.
Another thing in the summertime, our property again was 20 acres. And I remember my brother driving the tractor with a trailer hooked onto the back, and we would follow behind picking up rocks. Because every year, with the rain and everything, more rocks come to the surface. And so we were literally just clearing our land of big giant rocks and limbs and things like that.
I thought for some reason you were just picking up rocks because we don't know what to do with these kids.
That was
pick up a rock.
our landscaping.
Got it.
Basically. We were the landscapers.
That's awesome.
But yeah, in the summertime, it was weeding the garden was one of the biggest jobs. It's hard for me to know exactly what the size of an acre was, but I would guess our garden was bigger than 1 acre.
Yeah.
Very large.
I mean, it would have to be.
So yeah, weeding the garden pretty constantly. I'm trying to remember. Those are some of my biggest chores, was taking care of the animals and doing outside things. But there was always laundry to be done and things to clean in the house. But we tried to make it fun. This is the good side to it, I guess. We would play games with our chores. So in our house, we would call it, I don't remember if we actually named it, but basically we would play musical rooms. So we would have music playing, and every time the song switched, we would move to the other room that we, like, from the one that we were like cleaning. So my sister would be in one room, I'd be in the kitchen, she'd be in the living room. The song would switch, we would switch rooms.
Rotational cleaning.
Exactly.
Nice. So you don't have to scrub the toilet for 20 minutes.
Exactly.
3.5 minutes. Song ends. Now you get to wash dishes.
Leave the other half for the other person. Exactly. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Or, with 13 mouths to feed, there's constantly food to be made. And so actually when I was about 13, so they call me the oldest of the second family, actually.
The second family?
Because the sister right above me, there's 4 years between us. That's the biggest gap in our family.
Oh.
She was born really premature. There was quite a few complications around her birth and with my mom's health and things like that. And so basically the doctors told my mom, you need to take a break.
Wow.
And so that's the biggest gap, is the 4-year gap. So then by the time I was probably 11, 12-ish, 13, the older kids had all kind of left the home. And so I became kind of the oldest.
Oh.
And my mom actually didn't like cooking. And so at that point, I started taking over more of the cooking. I liked to cook, and I liked to experiment with different recipes and things like that. So I did a lot of the cooking at that point. But even when we were younger, we made everything from scratch, from, loaves and loaves of bread to everything. And so there was always something to do.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Tell me about middle school.
It was good-ish. I mean, that's when I kind of started, that's
puberty for most people.
So I don't know if I would say that it was good.
Yeah. Well,
I try to say that, about everything, but that was difficult. There was definitely some changes. I think I loved being out of the home for school. I preferred that to being homeschooled because we actually had some social interaction outside of siblings. I remember a lot of just driving. It took over 30 minutes to get to school and back. So I remember being crammed into a tiny, tiny little single cab that my brother had. And that was actually, those are fun memories, the drives to and from school with my older brother. At first it wasn't bad. I made, I had friends, and there was one year in middle school we actually had a basketball team. So there was a girls' basketball team.
Whoa!
This was the only organized sport any of us had ever played. There were 5 girls on the team.
Yeah.
So nobody ever got to sit out.
Nobody's benched.
Nobody ever. Most of us had never touched a basketball. But I actually fell in love with basketball that year.
Excellent.
That was a good memory. I became convinced that I was going to end up in the WNBA. I was pretty obsessed with that notion. I would come home and we had a mud pit that we turned into a home basketball court, and my brothers crafted a basketball goal with a wooden backboard.
Wow.
And so I would practice until I couldn't see the ball anymore and I couldn't feel my fingers anymore because it was cold. I became pretty obsessed with basketball that year, but we lost every single game that we played. Lost by 70 points. So,
but it didn't matter.
It didn't matter.
That's amazing. Were you still wearing a dress at this point?
We were able to wear basketball shorts that below our knees at that point.
Okay. Not to be weird, but
No.
How did it feel walking onto a court in front of people that you don't know wearing basketball shorts?
I think I was just relieved. I mean, I was definitely relieved not to have to wear a dress over them.
Oh, wow. Okay, so you were eager to get rid of the dress.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yeah, that was I mean, I like dresses, but no, that was never something that I felt the need to.
It was not your conviction.
No, definitely not. Less so as I got older, for sure.
So you said you would practice until you couldn't feel your fingers because it was so cold.
Mm-hmm.
I've been to Montana, but never in the winter.
Yeah.
Tell me about the weather in Montana, close to the Canadian border.
Whew. Memories that I have are being a little girl going with my dad on on a day of logging and playing in snowbanks that I believe were they were higher than the road. They were probably 12 or 13 feet high. And so you don't even sink down into them. I remember stepping outside and you feel like your lungs freezing and your nostrils freezing. So you have to keep your face covered. I remember though, things like we were stupid. We would have silly contests like, so when we had the schoolhouse on our property, we used to run from our house to the schoolhouse barefoot in, several feet of snow and,
Yeah, of
play
course.
fun games like that or go out and roll
Super
in the
fun.
snow without any, coats on or anything like that.
That's courting natural selection is what that's doing.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you survived.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
all
me
of your
too.
siblings survived as well?
They did. They
That's
are alive
amazing.
and functioning pretty well. For
Pretty
the most
well.
part.
Tell me about high school.
High school. This is where things get a little different. More different than what was already different.
Different from your norm.
Right. I actually did not finish 10th grade.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Do you have your GED now?
I do.
Okay.
Yes. So when I'm guessing it was the beginning of 10th grade. Again, my memory, you all have to forgive me, is not, is fuzzy for multiple reasons. But I think it was the beginning of 10th grade. And I had started to struggle with depression and eating disorders and self-harm.
Okay.
And so it was December of my 10th grade year, I guess, that I went to treatment for the first time. And so that's when I didn't go to school in that first treatment center. And then it was the next year when I went to another treatment center that I got my GED or continued doing school and got my GED.
So when all of that started,
Mm-hmm.
do you remember what precipitated that? Was there an event that started that, or was it just kind of a malaise that overtook you? Or
I was starting, I think the insecurities and unhappiness and things like that kind of happened over time. Honestly, the only specific memory I have as far as the eating disorder, I remember the first day that I skipped dinner. And it was a day that, and this, sounds silly now, but so another part of our story, obviously, is that we were not allowed to date or really even talk to members of the opposite sex. But when I was probably 12 is when we had our first computer, like little tiny old Apple computer.
Nice.
So I remember that everybody at school got email addresses, and a boy that I'd completely grown up with and had a crush on my entire life, we started exchanging emails. We never talked in person, even though we went to church and school together. We didn't actually have conversations in person, but we started exchanging emails. He began in the emails pressuring me for sexual things.
Wow.
And I said no multiple times, and he actually would kind of press further every time I said no, which doesn't really make sense to me, but
No. Yeah.
Anyway, long story short, because of that, he stopped emailing me, said he was not interested in the same things that I was, and asked if I knew a different girl's email address.
Wow.
So you can call that, I guess, breaking up, even though we were not even dating.
Yeah, no.
But I remembered that day and being devastated, of course, by that as a 12-year-old or 13, maybe. I don't remember my exact age. And I remember skipping dinner that night. And in my brain, somehow, I had the thought, if I were pretty enough, if I were skinny enough, it wouldn't have mattered to him that I said no. He would have liked me anyway, which is, a little bit mind blowing now to think about, but that's the brain of a 12 and 13-year-old girl.
For sure. Absolutely.
So that was the beginning of, it started out literally with skipping a meal. And I mean, at that point, I had never heard of an eating disorder. I'd never heard that term. I'd never heard of self-harm. I didn't know anything about any of that. But I started skipping meals, and I'd never been overweight, but I was strong and I was athletic. And in my brain, my body never fit into the ideal of what a girl should look like. And so I started to lose weight, and it quickly turned into something that it was the one thing I could control. My family didn't notice at first, I don't think. They didn't know. They didn't know to be on the lookout for your daughter skipping meals or anything like that, And so, yeah, it just kind of quickly turned into a control thing. It kind of turned into a testing my limits type of thing as well. Like I remember wondering, okay, how many days could I go without eating anything?
I hesitate to ask, how many did you go?
From what I can remember, and this is one of the reasons my memory gets foggy, is because of the lack of eating. From what I know, I believe I counted up to 14 days one time.
Oh my gosh.
Without any food.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And I don't believe I think I was drinking water, but I don't think I was drinking like anything with calories or sustenance in it either. So those 2 weeks, I remember counting the days, but the memories from those 2 weeks don't exist because your brain just doesn't function.
Right. You don't have any calories to burn.
Right. So yeah, things got scary pretty quickly.
I imagine your family noticed at some point in 14 days. I mean, I know how easy it is to lose track of one child.
Right.
With 4 of them. I can't imagine when there's that many kids and dad's gone working and, mom's just trying to keep the chaos to a minimum.
Yeah.
Make sure people are where they need to be and all of that.
Yeah.
I can imagine easily losing track of someone like that or something, a thing you don't think about.
Right. Yeah.
Of course your child's going to eat. Everybody eats.
Right.
You eat 3 times a day typically. That's a normal thing.
And when you're hiding something like that, you get very good at making it look like you ate or, you can get away with a lot, unfortunately.
But did somebody notice it at that point?
Yes. I was actually thinking about this the other day, which is kind of a weird thing. I literally remember, and my mom didn't have any idea, I don't think. I know she didn't have any idea of how many days it had been, but I know that she noticed I hadn't eaten or she was concerned. And so I remember the morning that she asked me to eat something. And I think I don't remember if she made the meal or if I made it, but it was kind of like, all I remember is the emotion of relief. Like it was weird. I was okay with eating because I think just the fact that she noticed and asked me to eat out of concern and love was like, it kind of gave me permission to like, okay, it's okay to eat now, just this one time. So I remember it was an egg and cheese omelet and orange juice. Like I still remember the food. So yeah, she did notice.
This is an ongoing thing.
Mm-hmm.
Eating disorders don't just come and go.
Right.
It was an ongoing thing. Did she start watching after that, or was that a... how long
I'm sure she probably did.
I guess the question is how long did this problem exist before your parents noticed and took significant action?
I don't remember exactly. I know it was less than a year.
Okay.
And I think I kind of started talking to a teacher at school about it before they were really aware. And then the teacher eventually went to them and said, hey, this is a problem.
Yeah.
So I don't know exactly. I know it was less than a year, from when I very first started struggling to when they were aware of it and started, being aware and watching more closely.
And you mentioned self-harm as well.
Yes.
Did that start about the same time?
Yes, it did. And that was, I mean, I think this is the first memory that I have of it. I was just so angry at myself one night. It could have been about a grade from school that day. I don't know. I was a perfectionist from the time that I can remember. So it could very well have been me being upset about a grade I had made or didn't want to make. But I just remember being extremely angry and grabbing the first thing that I saw and just hurting myself. And there was some kind of relief in that. And it became the only way that I knew how to release anger or any kind of negative emotion. We didn't talk about emotions growing up pretty much at all. So, I didn't have words for anything that I was feeling. I didn't have any concept of how to get it out of my body, out of my brain, out of my mouth. And so it just became something that I internalized and then took out on myself. Yeah.
Man. So self-harm,
Mm-hmm.
that leaves a mark.
Mm-hmm.
It's visible. I mean, I imagine you guys were probably wearing long sleeves and covered up and things like
Yes.
that, but did your folks notice that as well?
No, they did not notice it until, again, the teacher that I started talking to made them aware.
Wow.
I would purposely wear long sleeves and cover it up and hide it.
And your
So,
siblings didn't have any idea either?
no, not for at first.
Right.
Yeah.
So you said December of 10th grade?
Yes.
That's when you went to your first treatment?
Yes.
Um,
Facility.
where was that?
That was in Billings, Montana, which
Okay.
was about 11 hours from us. To give you an idea of the distance.
I love that you can drive 11 hours and still be in the same state.
Absolutely.
Montana's amazing.
Yep. Yes.
Okay. So it's residential, obviously. You're not driving there daily.
And it was actually a drug and alcohol center primarily. They did have an eating disorder wing or unit.
Mm-hmm.
And I went there because my parents did start taking me to doctors once they found out and things got more serious. I mean, I don't remember specifically, but I think I'd probably lost about 30 pounds at that point.
How tall are you?
I'm 5'4".
There's not a lot of you
Yeah.
to begin with.
Yeah, there wasn't. So I was pretty sick. And so they started taking me to doctors and just in town. I don't remember a whole lot of that. I think I did go to some counseling sessions as well before going into residential treatment. But long story short, from what I know, the doctors eventually got to the point where they told my parents she needs to go to a residential treatment center or we will involve CPS. So, my parents had no idea what to do. This was the first time any of us had struggled with a life controlling issue like this.
Right.
None of us had ever heard of an eating disorder.
Right.
None of us had ever heard of self-harm. And so, yeah, they didn't know what to do either.
Well, it's so bizarre and counterintuitive if you've never been exposed to those things.
Right.
To I can't imagine
No.
how scared they must have been.
Right. Yeah, I can't either.
So you went to a residential treatment facility. You were there for 6 months, you said?
No, 6 weeks.
6 weeks.
Yes, I was there for 6 weeks. It I'm not sure how to put it. I think I kind of learned more negative behaviors than I got any kind of good thing from it. There were, though, like my counselor there, I do remember, was very good, and my caseworker genuinely cared, and people there, the staff were genuinely trying to help, but I don't think that they were equipped to handle eating disorders for sure. And so I definitely learned more negative behaviors. And then physically, my body was reintroduced to food again. So prior to that, I had primarily struggled with anorexia, which is just starving yourself and not eating. After I left there, I very quickly started struggling with bulimia, more so.
Wow.
And part of that, I believe, was you can only starve yourself for so long.
Yeah.
And then when your body is reintroduced to food, it becomes harder to just completely starve yourself again. So then afterwards, I very quickly fell into struggling with both bulimia and anorexia. It got to the point where if I wasn't starving, I would starve myself for as long as possible and then end up, giving in and binging and purging. And it just turned into a pretty horrible cycle of that. So,
wow.
Yeah.
So that takes you through the rest of 10th grade, I'd imagine? I
guess
weren't
so.
going to school anymore.
I left there, I guess it would have been in January or maybe February, because I know I went in 2 weeks before Christmas.
So you would have left at the tail end of January.
Right. Yeah. And I actually, so while I was there, my caseworker there helped me fill out the application for Mercy. Well, it's now called Mercy Multiplied, but it was Mercy Ministries back then.
Okay.
Which was the next place that I went to. And so I finished that application and I was put on the waiting list for that. Because there's always a waiting list for it. And so I actually didn't go back home after leaving that treatment center. I went and lived with my oldest sister.
Okay.
Who was in Washington State at that point. She'd gotten married and moved to Washington State.
Wow.
So, yeah, I went and lived with her for 3 months before I got into Mercy.
Okay. So that was through the spring of that year.
Yes.
So you spent Christmas at a treatment facility. Oof.
Yeah.
And you'd never been away from your family like that.
Right. That was tough. I was 14 years old, and when I see a 14-year-old girl now and think about that, I felt a lot older in my brain at that point. Yeah. But now when I see a 14-year-old, I'm like, whoa, that was tough.
Yeah.
But I remember telling my parents, don't come visit me at Christmas. I didn't want them to leave the other children to drive 11 hours to come see me at a hospital. It was very much a hospital setting. And so it was very cold and lonely and sad. And I didn't want, the other kids to
see that either.
Yeah, no. So,
man. So you lived with your sister for 3 months and then you got into Mercy.
Yes.
And there are multiple Mercy locations around the country. Mm-hmm. But you got into the Nashville location?
Yes. I believe at that point, and maybe even still to this day, they're one of the only ones or the only one that accepts minors.
Oh, okay.
And
I thought that's all they did.
No, it's, I believe, from the ages, or at that point, it was the ages of 13 to 29.
Oh.
I don't know exactly what the age range is now. A lot of things have changed, so I'm not sure. But I believe at that point, it was aged 13 to 29 or 30-year-old women. So, yeah.
And for those that don't know, Mercy is
It is a Christian-based program that is nonprofit, and it is free. That was one of the other big reasons that I was able to go. So it is completely supported by donation, and it is a home for girls struggling with everything from the issues that I was struggling with to unplanned pregnancy, drug addiction, alcoholism, any range of life-controlling issues.
Criminal behavior.
Yeah. And it was started in Monroe, Louisiana, but the hub of it basically now is in Nashville, Tennessee.
Okay.
So
yeah. So Had you ever been out of I mean, you'd been to Washington.
Yes.
Other than that, had you ever been out of state?
No. I mean,
Or out of area, I guess I should say.
when I was in school still, before all of this happened, we used to go on choir trips in an old school bus, and we would travel across like Idaho and Washington. I think those were the only two states that we went into, and staying at like homeless shelters and things like that. And then, I mean, I'd been out of state. We'd had a family reunion in Ohio on my mom's side of the family when I was younger, and
That's
a family
that's
reunion.
different. That's a drive.
Yeah. A family reunion in one of the Dakotas. I don't remember what it was, the Black Hills. So whichever state, South Dakota. Yes. Yep. So trips like that I had been on, once or twice, or a very handful of times. But other than that, no, it was my first time like actually out of state by myself.
So how'd you get from Washington to Nashville?
I flew.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Which was a first?
I believe so.
Did you go alone?
I did. And I might have my dates mixed up a little bit because I know I was 15 when I got to Mercy, but it was June.
Okay.
And my birthday's in August. So I think I may have some of the dates mixed up, but you get the picture.
Close enough.
Yeah. I know I was 14 when I was in Rimrock, and then I was 15. So there might be more time in there that I am unaware of or can't remember.
It doesn't change the story.
Yeah.
So tell me about Mercy. When you got here, aside from it looks different in Nashville than it looks in Montana.
Everything is different in Nashville, yeah. I remember stepping off the plane in June and feeling like, oh my God, I cannot breathe.
Welcome to the jungle.
What is this? Yeah. Mercy, it was a culture shock in every conceivable way for me, honestly. From the people, from the amount of people, from just the size of the town, just driving. I remember the drive from the airport. I remember bits and pieces of the drive from the airport to the home, and just seeing interstates and big buildings. And, I'd never been in a town this size. So that was huge. I remember my first day, at Mercy, just standing in this, it's a giant, beautiful home, gorgeous. I mean, we don't even have brick homes in Montana. So just the brick homes in Nashville were a huge change, and coming into this beautiful home with beautiful furnishings and things. And then all of these women, from the staff to the other girls. And I remember a staff member approaching me and just putting her hand on my shoulder. I don't even know what her face looked like. I don't even know who it was, but just she put her hand on my shoulder and it felt like an electric shock from the top of my head down to the bottom of my toes. Because it just, she cared about me. Like I could just tell, and without words. And so, yeah, it was life-changing in many, many ways. Probably most of the people that knew me at that point will tell you it took 6 months to get 2 words out of me. I was completely shut down at that point. I was terrified to talk. I would sit in a counseling session. We had weekly counseling sessions, one-on-one with a counselor. And then we would have we went to church. It's very structured. There was always something.
Yep.
But my weekly counseling sessions, from what I remember in the first at least 6 months, if not more, it was mostly me being silent. My counselor either talking or sitting there in silence with me. And then I was also known for writing letters. So I would often write out all of my feelings and things I wanted to say to my counselor later and, slip them under her door. So really the first half of my stay there was me just barely coming out of my shell and learning how to talk to people.
Yeah.
So
tell me about daily life at Mercy. You said it's really structured, and I would imagine people who have compulsive behaviors and things like that, you can't allow free time
Right.
very
Yeah,
much.
it was very structured. I mean, you wake up early and had to be at breakfast at a certain time, and everybody has chore. I mean, you have to keep your room tidy, and then have other chores. Everybody helps clean the home, things like that, which
But
I was very used
It
to.
was a breeze for you.
I
I don't have to milk
actually,
anything. I don't have to do the gardening.
I got in trouble because we would have, so there are different hallways of bedrooms, and eventually I came to the point where I became the hall monitor, meaning I had to do my own chores, but then I had to check the other girls on my hallway and make sure their chores were done. But I actually got in trouble because I would, if there was a chore that I saw that wasn't done, I would do it rather than report it. And eventually the staff caught on to that.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, that was
Just
fun.
easier.
It is. It's just easier.
Just do it yourself.
And I would never tell on somebody else. I mean,
Because snitches get stitches.
right. But yeah, like major cleaning day was, I think, once a month, which was like a Saturday that we would we would like literally clean the grout with toothbrushes.
Right.
Like that kind of major cleaning day. It was probably one of my favorite days. Like that was home for me. But yeah, so there was that, and then there was Bible reading every morning, and there was classes. Either it was we watched a lot of Joyce Meyer, so it was either watching videos, or we would have a lot of guest speakers that came in from all over the world, Christian speakers. And there was worship time, and then there was lunch. I mean, I'm not saying all of this in exact order of the day, but
Sure.
all of these things were involved in every day.
Right.
And then in the afternoons there was rec time. So we would either go to the Y, or we would go on a neighborhood walk, or some kind of physical activity. On Fridays we had mall day, so we got to go to the mall. We would have to partner up, with a buddy, and we could be at the mall for a certain amount of hours and go shopping or whatever. The weekends were more relaxed. There weren't the, structured classes and things like that every day. So we had a lot more free time. We could watch movies and, have fun together and do things like that. So I liked the weekends, but
This may be going too far, but I'm going to ask anyway.
No, go
Were
ahead.
you able to act out in that structured environment, or is it locked down?
Many girls still acted out. Yes.
Okay.
There were always ways
Right.
to get around it. They did their best to keep us from doing that, or to be available for us to talk to rather than
Right.
to act out and that kind of thing. But no, I definitely still acted out in a lot of ways.
I mean, obviously you have to want to end those behaviors for that to ever happen.
Absolutely.
Nobody can supervise you into health.
Yes. Yeah.
I assume you did want, in theory, most of the time to get healthy, or how did you feel about all of that?
I would say that I did. Yes, I wasn't happy. Obviously, I was not happy
Sure.
with, the way that I was living, or just my, I was very much in a deep depression still, and the things that I was doing was not helping that. And I knew that, consciously, but there's also the other side of it of being, especially with an eating disorder, just the terror of what will life look like without this? How will I cope? Like, how do I live without this? Is that even possible? First of all. So there's a lot of fear, especially with eating disorders, of, fear of food and fear of how your body's going to change. And, how are you going to just cope with life without all of these behaviors?
You said earlier that the eating disorder was about control. It was a way you could control things.
Mm-hmm.
So by eating again, you're giving up control.
Yes.
And wow.
And you're trusting that the voices in your head are not telling the truth, because the voices in your head are screaming at you that you're going to gain a ton of weight, and you're going to, you're going to lose control, and things are just going to go crazy. And you have to trust the people that are telling you that those things aren't true.
Yeah.
So,
And again, as somebody who has never experienced this, how much of any given day are you thinking those thoughts?
in the beginning, 24/7, constant. I remember writing in my journal in the first couple of weeks of Mercy, I just want the voices to stop. Like it literally felt like a war in my head constantly. You're constantly thinking about numbers and the obsession. And I mean, it literally changes your brain chemistry. I mean, a disordered relationship with food. I mean, it literally changes your brain. You start to have body dysmorphia, which is where you look in the mirror and you see one thing that is totally different than what you actually are.
Right.
Like an example of that is before I went into Rimrock, the first treatment center, I remember somehow, this is when we were allowed to wear jeans at that point. I remember at one point in my...
That's how I marked time too.
Right.
When I was allowed to wear jeans
when
and when I
allowed
wasn't.
to wear jeans, yeah. But I remember somehow getting a hold of a pair of jeans that were a size 00. And I remember thinking in my head, when I can fit into these comfortably, I will be skinny enough. Like, then I can eat, it will be enough. And I wore those jeans into Rimrock and they were falling off of me. And I would have still told you I needed to lose weight.
Oh my gosh.
At that point. So yeah, it messes with your reality big time.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you were at Mercy for how long?
I was there for 15 months. Now I believe they have much more structured timeframes that they encourage. At that point, though, there really wasn't. And so it kind of was just based on when your counselor and you and the people on your team basically felt that you were ready to graduate. And I think I was actually supposed to graduate several months earlier than when I did. And when I found out that they were talking about it, I maybe engaged in some behaviors that showed them I wasn't ready. Possibly purposefully.
Wow.
Because I didn't want to leave.
Yeah.
I didn't want to leave. And I was terrified. I was terrified because Mercy became a bubble and it became a safe bubble. I was terrified of facing the outside world. I was terrified of not being surrounded by these amazing people that loved me and forgave me every time I screwed up and believed in me and told me that I could do anything. And, you know, all of those messages that I needed to hear for so long. And so, yeah, I was terrified of graduating. And then even when I did get to the point 15 months of actually having to graduate, I spent a good part of that day sitting on the director's lap crying. So still terrified.
Yeah. So that would have been fall of what year?
It was fall of 2006 and I had just turned 17.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did you have your GED at that point?
I got my GED officially the day before I graduated. So, yeah.
Nice. 2 graduations.
Yeah. Yes. So I got my GED on September 6th and I graduated September 7th of 2006.
So what happens when you graduate?
For me, in that year and a half that I had been at Mercy, my parents moved to Wyoming, actually. So I moved there with them. And honestly, that was the hardest year of my life.
Really?
Was the year after Mercy. Because I moved to a place where I had nobody. I didn't know anybody. And it was, again, out in the middle of nowhere, basically. And Mercy had contacted the church that my parents went to and spoken to the pastor, I think, and set up an accountability person there for me, which was good intentions, but again, it was a complete stranger, and it ended up being somebody that had no idea what an eating disorder was or anything about it or any of the issues that I still had. You don't just go
Right.
in and instantly get cured of it. So long story short, I moved there. I met with her maybe 5 times. Think we spent the entire hour every time we met talking more about her fibromyalgia than than what I needed or what I was struggling with. So that wasn't super helpful. Yeah, it was tough. I really wanted to stay in Nashville. I did not want to go back, but I wasn't 18 and my parents didn't want me to stay. And
Yeah.
so I did move back with them because I had to, basically. And from the moment I moved back, was just determined to come back to Nashville the minute I turned 18. So I set my mind to work really hard and save all my money. And that's what I did. But I struggled really hard with old behaviors.
Yeah.
Pretty immediately after I left, honestly. I mean, I tried. I really did. I tried I tried to make good choices. And that was one of the reasons I was terrified, is because I didn't trust myself that I was strong enough to do it. And so yeah, I struggled mostly with bulimia again, and definitely with self-harm again. I worked at a restaurant for 6 months, which is not very wise for a person with an eating disorder. I'll say that.
Think about that.
Yeah. So I worked at a restaurant for a while. Things got pretty bad. My dad convinced me to, I don't remember exactly how this worked, but at some point my dad convinced me to quit and start working for him. So then for the next 6 months-ish, I worked with my dad and my younger brother building storage barns.
Nice.
In the middle of the winter in Wyoming. So yeah, I did that. And I was living at home, so I saved every penny I could. And when I turned 18 a year later, I had already bought my plane ticket back to Nashville.
Wow. How did you? Okay. So you knew people from Mercy here still?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I knew people from Mercy, and then through different people at Mercy, I was connected to a church here in Nashville, a small church, and they had actually started a home that they were intending to be kind of a transitional home for anybody, any young woman that needed help kind of getting on her feet in Nashville. So I knew about that, and I was actually the first girl in that home when I moved back. And the woman that lived there, her name was Shalonda, and she had worked at Mercy. And so I had stayed in touch with staff members, my counselor, other people at Mercy, and people from that church throughout my year in Wyoming. I'd even come back to visit for a couple of girls' graduations and different things like that during that year. So yeah, that was my plan, was coming back and living in that home and getting on my feet here and figuring it out as I went.
So that would have been, because that was 2000, is it
2007.
Seven.
Yes. I moved back to Nashville on September 12th, 2007. So literally a year after I graduated.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So when you got to Nashville, what did you do?
I moved in into the house with Shalonda. And there were people at the church that they set me up with at that point to help me fill out a resume, open a bank account, all of the things that I had no idea how to do. And for the first month or so, I guess, I was instantly involved in the church and trying to look for a job, but I had, $3,000 that I wasn't. I guess I was scared
you weren't
to death.
In a rush.
Right, I wasn't in a super rush, but it got to the point where Shalonda told me my job was to find a job.
Yeah.
So she literally would make me leave the house from 8 to 5 and fill out applications and drive around town and go in and fill out applications everywhere, at the mall, this was in Franklin. So every shop in downtown Franklin, everywhere. And I remember calling her at 4:30 one time from my car and being like, I've filled out so-and-so many applications. I've talked to this many managers. And she said, it's 4:30. and I couldn't come home. Like I literally could not come home until 5 o'clock.
Oh
So,
my gosh.
but at the end of the day, that was, I mean, a very good lesson to me. And I ended up getting like 5 different job offers all at once.
Go figure.
Yeah. And so I started working at the mall.
Okay.
That was my first job. I got a job at Franklin Covey. No. I got a job at Banana Republic.
Then I definitely bought something from you
Yeah.
because I know that I bought clothes. I know I bought clothes from Banana Republic in that time period.
That's hilarious.
At that Banana Republic.
You probably did.
That's so bizarre. It's such a small world.
So yeah, I worked there for, I think it was probably into the next summer. I'm guessing.
Okay, so you were there for about a year, and then what happened after that?
And then I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life.
Right.
Like,
You have
as
to
far
decide what to
as
be when you grow up.
School or college or anything like that. I had actually applied to Trevecca when I was back in Wyoming, and I'd gotten in and I'd gotten a scholarship for it, but didn't end up going. I've always been good at giving friends back rubs. Like I've always had strong hands. I tell people now it's from milking cows. And so there was one night where I think I was rubbing Shalonda's shoulders and she made the comment, "You should go to school for this." And I had never had a massage. I had never heard of it being a profession, never thought about it being a profession. But I was like, hey, maybe I should. And within 2 weeks of that night, I was in school.
Wow.
We went to a school, we toured it. I heard, found out about the program. The pastor of the church that was, had this home and everything, he actually offered to, for me to work part-time at the church, and then part of my salary was them helping pay for my school, actually. So that's when I started school in 2008. And yeah, I loved it, and I stuck with the program, and I worked part-time at the church and went to school 5 days a week and graduated and got my license in January of 2009. So.
And you've been doing it ever since?
And I've been doing it ever since. So
that's very cool.
Coming up on 10 years, which is mind-blowing.
So other than one D-bag and some emails, we haven't heard about any romance.
Because that did not exist.
It's just you and the sheep out in Wyoming.
Well, yes, definitely there. And it's kind of hard to have romantic relationships when you're in a group home also.
Right,
So
yeah,
there's
sure.
that. But yeah, it's funny. I remember sitting on the plane back to Nashville after, when I was moving there at 18 and having the thought, oh my word, I can actually go on a date if I want. Like, that was literally mind-blowing to me. It was terrifying also.
Sure.
Because I didn't even know how to have a conversation with a male. But yeah, I remember having that thought. It still didn't happen for quite a while. There was one other guy that I dated basically in those first couple years in Nashville. And that lasted about 4 months and didn't work out.
Mm-hmm.
That was pretty much it. Then there was probably 2 years that I didn't date at all. And then in 2009 is when I met Skylar, my husband, for the first time. And then it wasn't until 2010 that we actually went on our first date and started dating.
So how did you meet?
We met at Blockbuster.
Yes!
On a random Friday night. True story. So
Looking at movies, trying to decide what to watch.
yeah.
That's fantastic. So
yeah.
You met him. What took so long?
Well, he actually didn't live in Nashville at the time. So I'll try to make this long story short. Shalonda and I walked into Blockbuster that evening, and my sister, actually one of my older sisters, was living here for a while at that point to go to school. So she was with us. And we walked in and I saw him. I know this sounds so cheesy, but I saw him at the back of the store, and I believe he had a photo shoot that day. And so I remember he was wearing a blazer and jeans. And something about that was just, and he's tall, he had dark hair, like the kind of guy that I had always been attracted to. And I remember elbowing Shalonda, was like, oh my gosh, look at that guy. And she's like, well, go talk to him. And I said, are you kidding me? Like, no way. No. Like, no concept of or desire to even make that happen. I was just like, no, he's just a hot guy. And he would never even look twice at me, is what I was thinking. Anyway, he was with his music producers at that point, or that night. And so Shalonda ended up starting a conversation with them in the middle of Blockbuster. And long story short, of course, he came over and then I came over. She says that I creeped up behind her and peeked over her shoulder. Not the case, but you get the picture. By the end of the night, we all had a conversation there in Blockbuster. Found out he was from Alabama, still living in Alabama, and was commuting up on the weekends to work on music. And so he told us about that. And they had, I think, just recently finished shooting a music video. And he had, at that point, MySpace and Facebook. And so, told us about that. So I do not remember the movie that we rented because we went straight home and looked him up on Facebook and MySpace and his music video. And I'm not even lying. He had done a cover. The music video was a cover of India Arie's Ready for Love. I don't know if you ever heard that song.
I know it well.
So we pulled that up and we watched it. And Shalonda turned around and looked at me and she said, that's husband material.
Nice.
Literally word for word. That's what she said. And so I sent him friend requests on both sides, of course. And we spent the year basically cyber stalking each other, but not speaking. Not a single word, not a message, nothing that entire year.
That's not what I thought.
Nope, not a single, nothing. Not a, hey, it was nice to meet you tonight, nothing. Literally about a year later, he sent me a message and it said, I can still pull it up. It said, hey, I think I met you at Blockbuster one night. He said, I'm getting ready to move to Nashville and I really want to, get to know some good people. You mentioned a church and I really want to find a good church there too. And he said, so I'm just reaching out. And he said, he said something along the lines of, if you're not that girl, I'm just a goob or something like basically, if you're not the one that I met at Blockbuster, I'm just a goob. Sorry. Yeah. But of course I was just, over the moon excited that this guy had sent me a message. So I instantly sent him a message back and nothing, nothing, no response from him.
Oh, Skylar.
So of course I was like, what the heck? Probably a month later, he did the same thing, sent me another message, random, short, still on his way of moving to Nashville. I don't think he'd officially moved yet. And again, I responded instantly and nothing.
Oh my God.
So he did that to me at least twice. And then finally, I believe it was the third time that he messaged me and I responded not quite as quickly. That he actually sent me a message in return.
Followed through.
Okay. We started talking a little bit online, and then at that point, I was no longer going to that same church. That church actually kind of fell apart, wasn't attending anymore. Mm-hmm. And he was he was never, talking about dating or anything like that. We were talking about going to church together,
Sure.
And he was trying to get involved in a community and that kind of thing. So we made plans to go to a church, to visit a church together, because I didn't have a regular church I was going to at that point. And he ended up having to cancel on me because of music. He had some kind of music practice come up or something like that. And so he said, I'm so sorry about that. Can I please make it up to you? Can we go to lunch? Can I take you to lunch tomorrow? So that was on a Sunday. And so our first lunch was on a Monday. And that was, that was it.
It was over.
We talked for, I think, over 2 hours at lunch before he had to go to work. And he sent me a text message within 15 minutes of me leaving the restaurant and said, I miss you already.
Oh.
So, yeah, the cheesiness gets cheesier. But,
So you wifed him as fast as possible.
Kind of. I tried to. We can say that.
Yeah.
We ended up dating for over 2 years, I believe, before we got engaged, and then we were engaged for a year before we got married. So, yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
My goodness. Is there anything I'm forgetting at this point?
I'm trying to think. I mean, of course, there's hours worth of material we could talk about with all of that, but nothing major, I don't think.
Always. There's always more details.
Yeah.
That's part of what I love about this. What are you afraid of?
What am I afraid of? I am afraid of living a life that leaves no impact. Living a life that, that doesn't impact anybody, or that, and that doesn't have to be anything major. You know, I want people to, think of good things when they think of me, when they remember me. You know, to know that I showed love, to know that I was a good human. And yeah, I think the saddest kind of life is the life that's forgettable, even to the people that are close to you. So, yeah.
What do you regret?
What do I regret? That is a really hard question, because I could say a lot of things, but then at the same time, all of the things in my life brought me to where I am today. So, but then I don't also want to say I have no regrets. I don't know. That's a really tough question. But I don't have anything that I deeply regret, except for the times that I've hurt people, honestly. Any actions, choices that I've made that have impacted others in a negative way. I don't mean that cheesily or, in a goody two-shoes kind of way. Like, I sincerely mean that. Those are the only types of things that I would regret.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
Who is God?
I've been thinking a lot about that question all week. I have come to believe that God is bigger and more indescribable, and just so far out of the box that I was raised to believe he was in.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's a question that that any of us can really answer in our lifetime. We're human. And God is a being that is so much bigger than that. But I know that I believe that I wouldn't be here without him. None of us would be here without him. So I believe he's the creator. And he's really the source of my hope in this world. He's the source of love. And it's a love that I am realizing more and more is beyond what I can ever grasp. So, yeah.
I hope you enjoyed hearing that as much as I did. I have listened to that interview probably 4 or 5 times after editing it all, and I could listen to her talking about her childhood for hours more. That is such a unique experience and so completely different from anything I experienced. As this is the first episode, this is my first opportunity to tell you that I make portraits of everyone who comes and sits down with me. They are all available to be seen on our website, butenoughAbout.me. The website again is butenoughAbout.me. You can go there. You can see the portraits. You can connect with us and drop us a line. If you or someone you know should be interviewed, then please let us know, especially if you're in the Nashville area. I'm always looking for more people to talk to. Again, you can contact us through the website. You look at the portraits there and find connections to other episodes. But enough about .me. The intro music was performed and written by Mr. Jace Hackman. He is a great guitar player and singer-songwriter. You can find his work at jacehackman.com, Jase hackman.com, just like it sounds. The logo was designed by the talented Mr. Casey Jones. You can connect with him at iamcaseyjones.com. Again, my name is Tyler Andrews, but enough about me. The website is butenoughAbout.me. If this has encouraged you at all to listen to people's stories, that is the goal. Go find someone that you know or someone you don't know. Buy them a cup of coffee and ask them to tell you their story. Thanks so much, and I'll see you guys in a couple of weeks.